We have a visiting author, ire'ne Silva, who's coming today, who taught me so much about a writer writing for community, writing, and as you talk about in your keynote address, a writer who's caring for ourselves, for our community, appreciating the strength and wisdom of our ancestors. So you've taught me so much through your writing workshops, your readings, your art, and the fact that you're here. We are so fortunate. A lot of the students have been studying your work. We're excited you're here, and it's really momentous that you are here bringing us your gift of song, so thank you. And Professor Tom Murphy's going to come and talk about the People's Poetry Festival.
Yeah, so we're having the 5th Annual People's Poetry Festival starting on February 27th and going to the 29th. So it's a 3-day festival. We're starting off, and let me actually get this. We have so many panels. I think it's 10 panels or something. We have one purely in Spanish on Saturday. I was going to try to do this in order, but it's impossible to do here. Let's see. But we do, if you go to Facebook, you can see some of the panels there. We have People's Poetry Festival on Fest on Facebook. Thursday night, we're going to be at the Del Mar, the Education Center for Economic Development. And we have one of the poets that's going to be reading here, Dylan Lopez. Nick Carbo is a poet from the Philippines. He's internationally known. He's been published in many high-level journals, and he lives locally. And so we're going to have him. Karen Klein-Tardy runs the Bella Brew open mic in Rockport. She'll be in town. And so we have some others. Amanda King is a student here. Okay, so we have quite a few. And then we have spiritual nature and nature and spirituality. Some heavy-hitting poets here. Ken is from Oklahoma. Carol Coffey-Reposa was the 2018 Poet Laureate of Texas. So we have all kinds of people. We have Queering Turtle Island, a panel with Zoe and Robin, and some other heavy hitters here. So there's going to be a really great conference here. We'll have narrative, and the times you can see here, Alan Barreca, Sarah Lentz, and Paul McCann and Michael Quintana teach at Del Mar College and have MFAs in writing. We'll have a one on slam poetry too, with Stefan Sudens and some 3 slam poets. Emily Shaver Northrop is local. She got an MA and MPA on campus here. And then we're going to have a open mic at downtown at Graffiti's. It's on Star Street there. It's right next to Flanagan's. So that'll be nice too on Friday night. And then Saturday we have a kind of a wild panel. Wall killers, Trump lovers need not apply. Should be rather interesting. Some very heavy hitters there with Juan Manuel Perez, who is the current Poet Laureate of Corpus Christi. And then, like I said, the Spanish panel, Javier Villarreal is doing. Octavio Quintanilla has just been the past Poet Laureate of San Antonio. Some other great writers from the Rio Grande Valley are going to be there. I'm doing a panel on death.
It'll be a lot of fun.
And we have a really good group of writers there. P.W. Covington is coming from Albuquerque. Nathan Brown was the 2012-2014 Oklahoma Poet Laureate. And these, Julie Chappell is coming from Oklahoma as well. Then we're going to have like a final thing we're going to do is 1-hour open mic of just the poets from the conference itself, and that are going to be addressing an issue of violence and healing from it. And we're talking about the mass shootings that happened here in Texas and what poetry can do for that. And so we're going to have those poems. Hey, how you doing? And respond to that. So it should be a great opportunity there. And they'll be hosted by Rudy and Crystal Garcia of Revolve One podcast. If you don't know about them, they're actually going to have a open mic too at the Exchange on the 26th, the Wednesday before the festival opens up. And so they've become one of our new partners. Thank you very much. I do want to introduce now the chair of the Authors Day, Chuck Etheridge. Dr. Chuck Etheridge, please.
Thank you. I think you can tell creative writing is alive and well in Corpus Christi and on the island. If you're not plugged in with us, if you're not plugged in with one of these teachers or one of these great writers, there's great places to come in. There's going to be open mic for Black History Month. There's going to be no open mic for Women's History Month. There are open mics regularly at Del Mar. There's I didn't get you on my roll sheet yet. I'm sorry. I'm taking a roll here while we're talking. But anyway, but we really we love writing. We love to encourage young writers. We love to see students accomplish things. So please, please, please plug in with us. But it's enough about us. It is my great pleasure to introduce ire'ne Lara Silva, who has adopted the convention of, like E. Cummins, writing her name all in lower cases, so if you saw the flyers, they were not typos or anything like that as well. She originally comes from the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, and her parents were migrant farm workers, and she spent many years moving from South Texas to Mathis, which we talked about, to Oklahoma, to the Panhandle, and we've got an influx. Great. Wonderful to see you all as well. She, in a Texas Monthly interview, she talked about how books were a refuge when she was young, how she loved science fiction and fantasy, which forms the cockles of my heart, as well, and also the works of Emily Bronte. But she had to go, it was kind of funny, she talks about going off to selecting her college by how far away it was from her parents. And so she wound up in at Cornell University in western New York, which was about, what, 2,000 miles or so away from mom and dad at the time. But she had to go all the way to Cornell to study Latinx writers, to find out that they were important writers from the Latino and Latina culture that were studied in college. And so that was a revelation for her, and that has led her to poetry. She is author of 3 chapbooks of poetry, 3 full-length books of poetry, and a short story collection. Her work has appeared in various journals, Centos Review, Pilgrimage, Yellow Medicine Review, and various anthologies, including Improbable Worlds, an anthology of Texas, Louisiana poets, and the Weight of Edition, an anthology of Texas poetry. Now, if you're not into literature, creative writing, you don't know that this is a big deal, so I'll just let you know these are big deals in case I don't know. Her second collection of poetry, Blood Sugar Canto, was published by Saddle Road Press in January 2016. Silva is co-editors of a number of important anthologies as well. And her third book, Cuicacayi, or House of Song, was published with much fanfare in 2019. And you can buy all these out there in the lobby, and then you can come and bring them, and she will sign them, and you will have a signed copy of her work. Her first collection of poetry, Furia, received an honorable mention for the International Latino Book Award. Her story, Flesh to the Bone, won the Premio Aslan Literary Prize, and was a fiction finalist for Room of Her Own's Foundation Gift of Freedom Award, and was a finalist for Ford Review's Book of the Year in Multicultural Fiction. She's also, I'm just going to, she's won a lot of awards. 2014 Alfredo Cisneros de Moral Award, and the Gloria Ansaldo Milagro Award as well. She's been the coordinator of a number of writers' workshops, and some of us have had the privilege of being in our workshops, so we can tell you it's good stuff as well. In a review of Cuicacayi, Texas Monthly wrote that much of Lara Silva's writing centers around the beauty and pain of the Latinx experience. She was drawn to the sense that Cuicacayi connotes. For most of her life, the story she was taught about her own culture cast Mexicans in the roles of villains or victims, and she wanted to flip the script. I'm quoting her now. I want to imagine our community beyond that pain. I've been meditating on our history for 25 years now, and our survival is a thing of beauty. It shows a strength that should be admired. We've been beaten down, but we've been endured. When you think about how much suppression of our history and culture there was over the years, then the indigenous foods, words, and part of our religion that have survived are a miracle. And let's empower ourselves with that knowledge. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce ire'ne Lara Silva.
So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for, spending Thursday night here with us. And this is a really great way for me to kick off this year. My year starts right at my birthday, and yesterday was my birthday. So officially, this is the second day of my year. And it's wonderful to be here with y'all. I was telling Chuck, I've avoided Corpus Christi for about 20 years because I have family near here. And so I try not to be anywhere where they're going to see me or I'm going to run into them at HB or anything like that. So, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful day, and I'm really enjoying being here. And I thank you all for, for the invitation and for the lovely hospitality. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow's workshop as well. So, all good things. I'm trying to think where to start, and I think I want to start with birds. Because Chuck was just telling me on the walk over here from the parking lot how this is an unusual place because there's different birds that don't meet up in other places. And I was driving along the beach, and I parked on the North Beach access just to kind of look at everything, and I saw these birds all over the place. And so I'm actually going to start with a little excerpt from a short story that has to do with a lechuza. So how many of y'all are familiar with lechuzas? So the story that I heard growing up was that it was like a very telenovela story. That it was that there was a woman who was a lechuza, and she was in love with this man, but the man didn't know she was a lechuza. And so time passed. He cheated on her, or it turned out he'd been married all along, or whatever it was. But she was betrayed. And when she was, realized she was betrayed, she decided to seek revenge by trying to attack and kill him. And what happens instead when she attacks and kills him is that she gets shot and she falls down from the sky. Because she's flying to attack him, of course. So she gets shot, and that's when they realize that this owl creature was actually a woman. And so she dies. And so in my take on the story, I was going to import a little bit of one of my college heartbreaks and have my lechuza be an upstate New York college student who gets betrayed and then kind of lives through all of this. But what was interesting about writing the stories in this book is that I think when I started, I was torn between the idea of what kinds of stories tell about self-destruction and what kind of stories talk about transformation. And over the years and years that I spent working on this book, I realized that writing self-destruction wasn't that interesting to me because I'd seen self-destruction, in the lives of people around me. I'd seen self-destruction be modeled over and over and over again. It didn't, to me, seem to require that much imagination to write about self-destruction. So I ended up moving all of these stories to make them stories that talked about transformation. How we survive, how we heal, how we redefine ourselves, how we empower ourselves. So, like I said, I'm just going to read a little piece of it. You'll have to buy the book to find out what else happens in the story, and to find out how it ends, because you will never see the end coming. I love this story. So it's called Tecolote. When I was a child, Tia would call me her little angel. I would rest my head against her shoulder and hook my chin on the arm embracing me. Mornings, she always smelled of gardenias, but at night, tucking me into bed, she smelled of cinnamon and chocolate. Even in my first memories, her rounded arms were my refuge. When she would release me, I'd feel like a little bird in the first instance of flying, tumbling and gasping. Her worn hands would trace faint lines down both sides of my back, showing me where my wings had once been. She'd tell me that I could fly, if only I'd remember how. I would climb up trees and roofs, anything that brought me closer to the sky. I'd imagine myself with wings, imagine myself lighter than air, but my body always resisted. It always fell back to the ground, clinging to the earth. Tia would run to pick me up after I'd fallen. She'd kiss my bruises and cuddle me in her arms, tell me that I'd almost flown, almost remembered, that she'd seen my body hover for an instant before falling. We'd look up at the sky while she spun me around, singing in her quavering voice, "Next time you'll fly, next time." Then she would take my little hand and hold it up to the sky against hers. "You need to remember how to fly so that you can find your way para el cielo and make a little house for us, just you and me." And I would nod and hold her hand and promise that one day I would fly and take her with me. She told me not to make promises I couldn't keep, told me there was a burning place for liars who forgot their promises. I promised her I'd always love her best, always want to take her with me, always keep my promise. I wanted wings more than I wanted toys, more than I wanted friends. Wind excited me. I'd walk on tiptoes, waiting for wings to unfold from my back and for the wind to carry me away. I'd leave buttons loose and let coats and scarves float up around me, my long hair urging flight. At night, when the wind made sounds against the walls, I'd leave the house and climb trees, feeling the dip and sway of their branches. The leaves would make whispering noises against each other, twigs and seeds throwing themselves into the wind. The night sky and the long rush of clouds wrapping themselves around a dim moon. Dia would run out in the dark to collect whatever laundry was still on the clothesline, loudly exclaiming, "Niña, bájate de allí. The lechuzas are going to steal you along with the clothes. Inside, hurry, hurry." We'd go inside, but I'd sleep with my forehead pressed against the window, the wind's hum on my brow. My favorite game was playing tecoloto with my tia. She told me to be my wings, as if they were body and not limb, as if my heart rested in the wings I couldn't see, as if my blood ran through the lattice work of tracing lines on my feathers. She'd lift me up into the trees and I'd perch there, learning how to remain motionless and balanced for hours at a time, how to turn my head slowly and take in everything around me. Sometimes I'd stand at the base of the tree, waiting for bobwhite quails, squirrels, mice, grasshoppers to pass by. I'd pounce on them as silently as I could. I played at being a creature of the wilderness, believed I was one, until the day my mother caught me perching at the edge of the roof, wearing bedraggled paper feathers, releasing the mouse I'd caught with my bare hands. And so time passes, and she grows up, and she goes to college, and she falls in love. I never told you. When I met you, what I loved first were your solemn black eyes. So much light, so much darkness, as if you were moments away from weeping, as if you'd wept for so long the tears had left their shadows on you. Bottomless eyes, black waters. The first time you looked at me, I staggered as if I'd been struck a physical blow. I recognized you. You belonged to me. Everything in me wanted to devour you, wanted to be devoured by you. I loved your sad eyes and your furrowed brow, your black hair, your tender lower lip. I loved you for years before you noticed me. Both of us far from home, both of us from border towns that had molded us, both of us from families that had wandered the Southwest, migrating to harvest crops of all kinds. For me, I'd heard of it in stories. But you had worked the fields until the week before you came to this university and this tiny northeastern town where we were both students. In the years I knew you, there were always women waiting for your gaze to fall on them. I refused to stand in line, and I refused to beg. I was never going to tell you how I felt, because I refused to be one of many. But then you were there, kissing the palms of my hands, and you would not leave my side, and you looked at me as if only I existed in your world. I was your palomita de canela, you said. You marveled at finding a woman with such dark skin, the same brown as yours, so far north. Was I lost? Had I wandered off the path of our seasonal migrations? You decided it was a miracle to find me in the midst of so much snow. You said that finally you had seen me. That was when I let you hold me. Falling into your arms, I remembered faded dreams of wings and flight. You held me close, like a tree sheltering the spirits of tiny birds. You held me loosely, as if you knew I'd never willingly fly away. You held me singing Ramon Ayala songs against my ear, your breath on my neck, and we danced. At night, I traced the hard angles and planes of your face with my fingers and hands, tasted the long river of your throat. Your skin smelled like sunlight, wavered like the hazy heat above summer roads and August cornfields. Your mouth tasted like salt, like the ocean, and sweet, like rich earth in my mouth. I bit your hands and tasted every fruit, every vegetable they'd ever held, onions, corn, strawberries, earth, and more earth. You twined me about you, vines burst from you, their green leaves flushing against my skin. Your calloused hands ran over my body and brown speckled down burst from my throat, cinnamon colored across my belly. My heart thudded faster under the breast in your hand. You bit my shoulder, and I felt unknown bones shift under your mouth. Your hands skimmed my back, my hips and feathers fluttered under your touch. My face flared, suddenly heart-shaped against your neck as my eyes darkened, my beak pushing into the seed-filled silt of your hair. You lifted me above you, and as I rocked against you, I stretched my arms, stretched my spine. Something uncoiled inside me. Wings unfurled from my shoulders, feathers flowing out. They began to beat, kept beating, spreading across the room, tips almost touching both walls. I rocked against you, my heart hammering. When my back arched, I saw the sky, felt gravity lose its hold. You crumpled into clods of earth beneath my feathered legs, and my face dove into the space between your neck and shoulder. We rested, covered in feathers, in a bed of black earth. And so yeah, from there everything gets all dramatic. She gets betrayed. She learns how to become a lechuza. She goes to get her revenge. Her tia comes back. More lechuzas in the sky. All kinds of stuff like that. So let me see. We'll move over to some poetry. So usually what people do with poetry is they try to start you off with something nice and gentle. I like to start people off with the hardest, most difficult poem that there is, because then after that everything's all easy. So I'm going to read you the hardest poem, the poem that was the hardest for me to write. And the first 3 or 4 years that I read it, I cried over and over and over again every single time I read it. I read it even though, like, at my breath, I couldn't get my breath, I couldn't speak, I'd start crying. But I had a really good friend who was an older poet when I met her. Or actually, she was in her 70s, I was in my 20s. And every time she'd read her poetry, her hands would start shaking and she'd start tearing up. And people would always try to help her or to tell her it's okay, you don't need to read it, or I'll hold it for you. And she would say, leave me alone. She'd be like, get off me. Stop all this. Let me share with you what I'm feeling. I am giving you my tears, and I'm giving you my nervousness, and I'm giving you my sadness. And I always thought that was the most beautiful thing. So so every time that I start to get emotional about a poem, I'm just like, I think of my friend Lydia. And I'm like, it's such a gift to give a real thing that I think, even though sometimes that can be a bit awkward or a bit odd, it's so precious to give something real. Of course, now I've been reading this poem for 8 years, so I've stopped crying for the most part. So this book of poetry is my second book of poetry. It's called Blood Sugar Canto, and I started it because I wanted to deal with the fear of diabetes. My dad had it, my mother had it, my siblings have it. My younger brother who lives with me, he's in a wheelchair. He's had it for years. He just had his leg amputated a few years ago. He's doing well, he's stabilized now. But I also have grandparents, uncles, and aunts, and cousins, and everyone is dealing with this. And so when I was diagnosed as diabetic 12 years ago, it seemed to me that a lot of what I had to deal with was fear. And so I thought, I'm going to write a book about that. I'm just going to write a whole book about getting rid of fear and approach diabetes from every single point of view that I can do, whether I'm talking about diet or community or history or family or the idea of sustos or anything. So that's what this book is. But the hardest poem to write was the one that deals with my father's greatest fear. So what my father was most afraid of was amputation. And actually, before he died, I didn't speak to him the last 4 years he was alive until I heard, that he had an amputation. And actually, I talk about this in the poem, so it's in there too. But that was his fear, what that would mean. And I'm really glad I wrote this poem before my brother's amputation, because I'm not quite sure what I would write now. En trozos, in pieces. I never met my mother's mother. Concepcion Ligues Lara died the year before I was born. My father told stories about rushing her to the doctor to have her toe, her black flesh toe, amputated. My mother never said anything, never said how she died, never described her illness. The last time I saw my tia Lupe, it was my mother's funeral. My tia died 2 years later. I remember her strong, graceful, lifting herself out of the car into the wheelchair, survivor of amputation, toes, feet, legs. They'd begun on her fingers. My father had been diabetic for 6 years. The only time I ever saw him cry was after the doctor told him it was likely they would have to amputate his foot. He turned his face to the pillow, body convulsing, broken sobs. He healed, kept his feet for another 18 years. After 4 years of silence, I called when I heard he'd lost one foot. Neither of us spoke of it. We spoke of living and of pain, of dying and the end of fear. We said goodbye, knew we would not speak again. Later I learned they also amputated his other foot. What he feared most was to go in pieces. Now I fear it too. Strange dazed terror when I see the crutch, the walker, the wheelchair, the power scooters. Terror when I see the missing foot, the missing limb, strangers on the bus and at the store and at work and on the street, anywhere, everywhere, terror. Yes, limbs are lost every day to war, in car accidents, at work, to freezing temperatures, to violence, but this is the terror of being devoured. One limb not being enough to satiate the beast. This is the terror of going piece by piece. Would I be strong enough to follow my tia Lupa's example? Would I want to? Could I see myself go in pieces? I think I would choose to live, but I don't know. There is a prayer I cannot help. Diosito, grant me 75 years of life to do my work. Please, I want to stay whole and strong, able to walk. I know this is selfish. I have already been given more than others, more life, more strength, more freedom, more health, more love, more time. But I can't help wanting more. Sometimes I hold my feet, my calves in my hands, stare at my fingers. I cannot comprehend my body without them. Oh body, cuerpecito mío, how many years I wasted not loving you, judging you for what they said you lacked, for what you were too much of. Too big, too dark, too fat, too short, too India, too masculine, not pretty enough, not feminine enough, not worthy of love. What does any of that matter now? Oh body, cuerpecito mío, I will never see you through their eyes again, only through mine, praising your strength and your beauty, the life I've lived through you, your joy and your endurance, your hunger and your light. I will learn to take care of you as I have learned to love you. No terror, only love. So after that, I was like, cool, I can write the rest of these poems, you know. I just had to move through that one. There's one poem I do want to share. So as I was saying, so a lot of it was thinking about fear and thinking through fear. But I realized before, let me see, where am I? Here we go. I realized that I needed a whole section of this book to be about love poems. There's a very funny one in here, the only funny one. Which I won't read right now, because I do believe we have at least one middle schooler in here. But it was inspired by, you see these commercials where people are like getting whipped cream and strawberries and chocolate syrup from the fridge to have a fun night with their date, lover, spouse, whoever. And I was like, diabetic people can't do that. So, so that poem was in there, but I won't read it right now. But one of the other things that occurred to me was that sometimes when you have an illness, you learn things about the body that you wouldn't otherwise learn. Like, I don't know how many healthy people, like when you're completely healthy, that you bother to learn what your kidneys look like and where they are and what they do, or your liver, or you don't, in some ways you don't have to know because everything's working fine, so you can kind of ignore it. But when you are dealing with an illness, you kind of you learn these things. You learn what your organs are, what color they are, where they are, what they do. And one day I thought, you know, my organs need their own love poems. So there is a very long poem in here, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to kind of read little bits out of it. That's called Love Song for My Organs, because they needed a poem too. Love Song for My Organs, or many poems. This is a song I didn't know needed singing. A song for each morning, a song for each night, offered with awareness, offered with gratitude. Decades have passed. I did not know your colors, your shapes, the work you do, have done, or what you needed from me. Now I know this song needs singing. I will sing it everywhere I go. I name you now, breathe softly upon you, hold you tenderly within. Kidneys. You are not forgotten, never. You are cherished, and I am grateful. I bring you rainwater and river water. I bring you flowers, tiny blue flowers. I bring you these, my two hands filled with sunlight, with starlight. I sing you strong, sing you whole, and thank you for filtering my blood. Heart, be strong, little heart, as strong as you have ever been. You are my life. When I am still, I hear your beating, feel it in my chest, hold you close in a dance that will not pause while we are living. I envision the flow of blood, flowing to you, flowing from you, moving easily, moving swiftly through wide open blood vessels. Pancreas. You have been sleeping, little warrior. It is time to wake, time to speak again. I will bring you morning serenades, cascading flower petals, and trilling birdsong. You fought the rising glucose hordes, fought until you were spent, until you could not go on. Years now I have lived on foreign insulin, always approximate, subject to wild swings of not enough, too much, almost in time. I long for your fine-tuned calibration. I see you rising, I hear you murmuring, words spoken at dawn, I greet you. Liver, nerves, skin, eyes, gratitude. Gratitude. Please forgive any harm I have caused you. Thank you for this day, for every day you have given me. Now I know this song needs singing. I will sing it everywhere I go. I name you now, breathe softly upon you, hold you tenderly within. I usually like to read a couple angry ones, but I'm like in a really good mood right now. So, I don't know whether, so there's a lot of angry at doctor poems in here. Do y'all want to read the one nice one, or do y'all want one of the angry ones? Y'all's choice.
Angry.
You know, because that's fun, it's just fun to do that. So this is based on a true story. So I have a brother who lives with me, and he's in a butcher now. But he was having difficulty with his gallbladder. In fact, it got so bad, his gallbladder grew a second skin, trying not to burst. And I took him to the emergency room maybe 4 or 5 times in the span of 2 weeks before we finally got him to surgery, and they were able to remove the gallbladder. And I did not change the name of the doctor. If you're going to curse someone, you better, use the right name. So the title is, quote, "We don't give morphine for heartburn." Dr. Dos Santos, you would have left my brother to die. You saw him, a young brown-skinned man with scars and tattoos, and decided after a 5-second examination to discharge him. "We don't give morphine for heartburn," you said, and turned away. When we returned to the emergency room a few days later, the doctor read your notes and turned us away within minutes. And the next 3 doctors did the same, and every time the nurses too were more calloused and wouldn't listen, though I pleaded and pleaded. Doctor, you left us desperate, him writhing in pain, me helpless and unable to help. I watched him grow sicker, turn yellow, and when it was more than he could bear, we readied ourselves again for the drive to the only hospital that took patients without insurance, readied ourselves for the hours-long wait to see a doctor. Finally, there was one who realized what was going on, and within a few minutes had him admitted, and before the sun rose, he was scheduled for surgery later that afternoon. And for the first time in days, I saw his pain ease when they started the morphine drip. There was so much to learn, so much to accept, not just this needed surgery, but to learn he was diabetic and had high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Many doctors after that, and for several days I slept on the floor of that hospital room, and finally, though he was weak and recovering with a new 11-inch wound, he was no longer nauseous and in pain and in need of help I could not give him. I am grateful for that. Every day I am grateful I didn't lose him. I am grateful that we went back and insisted and insisted. But Dr. Dos Santos, I curse your name. Every time I pass that hospital, every time I think of you, I hope one day you are left writhing, waiting, mad with pain. I hope you are ignored, dismissed, left helpless. I cannot forgive you, doctor. I will never forgive you. I hope you burn in hell. So I hadn't read that one in a while. Okay, very big switch now. So I have this crazy writing workshop I do where I get people throwing gritos, and I make them a little crazy because we start off with just throwing a grito, and then I make them do happy gritos, and then I'm like, okay, let's do sad gritos, and let's go back to happy gritos, and then let's do free gritos, and like by the end of the thing, like everyone's dizzy because it's just like, it's not just making this loud sound, but it's all this like dizzying variety of emotions. But the way that I see it, I think when you're writing, what you need more than vocabulary, what you need more than, not more than, what you also need with technique and everything else, is that you need your emotions. You know, the same way that a painter painting needs more than 2 or 3 colors. You need all of your emotions. You need as many colors as you can get, and you need them close, so that when you're writing, you can pull on these things. So that's why I don't worry too much about transitions between really mad poems and really sad poems and other poems, because we need all this stuff. All this stuff is there all the time. So that's going to bring me to my latest book, which came out last year. And Cuicacali is a Nahuatl word, an Aztec word. It means house of song, which already I was going to love the word anyway, because house of song, like that's just beautiful. But also, it turns out that the Cuicacali was where they would send young boys to become soldiers, to train them. And I love this idea of, I was trying to explain to Chuck quickly earlier, but you know, we talk a lot about generational trauma, about about oppression and colonization and all the different things. And then we talk about how we heal from them, how we work through them. But I've become really interested in the idea of not just healing, but how do we make ourselves stronger? How do we make it so that we are not wounded any further? Because if you look at this idea of you live, you are wounded, you have to go through this whole process of healing. Maybe it goes like this, and whichever way it goes. And then you come here, and then you have to deal with the next thing and heal. It saves a lot of time if you just don't get wounded in the first place. So, how do we build our strength? How do we build ourselves within ourselves, within our history, with others, in community, in art? How do we build our strength? And so that was one of the ideas that kind of, that I hope flows through this book, as well as the ideas of, you know, as Mexican Americans or Latinx people or different people that are in the U.S. that have a Native or Indigenous heritage. You know, how do we claim that, even if it's something that we can't claim directly because we don't have, you know, we're not registered with the U.S. But it's something that is obvious in the way that we've grown, the way that, you know, it's one of the prices that history has exacted, that it has taken that sense of belonging away from us. But yet, it's still part of who we are. So I wanted to talk about indigeneity, I wanted to talk about history, I wanted to talk about the way that I was generally feeling last year, or rather 2018 when I was writing this. So there's a lot of of different kinds of poems that I think all, in some way or the other, end up making sense with each other. So I wanted to start, I think, with the first poem. So I've lived in Austin now for 22 years. My favorite thing about Austin is the river. And so I cross that river every day. I do not like going to work downtown, but I love crossing the river every day. And so I give, I give a little prayer to the river every time I cross it in the morning and in the evening. And this one day, I was thinking about the river that I love in Austin, and I was thinking about, the Rio Grande, which I grew, a lot of my childhood was in the Rio Grande Valley. So I was thinking about the two rivers, and this poem started. You love a river. For 20 years, you love a river, and every time you cross it or sit to stare at it, you imagine your suddenly immense hands brushing over its calm ripples, as if it was fur, as if it was skin, as if it could touch you back, as if it also loved you, as if it had waited for you always, this peaceful, uncontested river, always serene, so different from that other river, the river that has defined your entire life. The river you love is far, but not that far from that other river. That other river, sometimes muddy, sometimes dry, sometimes green, sometimes lovely, but you can never think of it without seeing almost 2 centuries of blood shed over it. Can never see it without thinking of the lives, the pain, the hurt, the losses crossing that river has cost. You have always loved rivers, but is it still a river if it has walls? So I got here a little bit earlier than I expected this afternoon, and so I was just driving around for the fun of it, because, the beach. But I've been telling everybody that I've either messaged or talked to this afternoon how the Whataburger surprised me. That's insane. That Whataburger is crazy. So I have to read this poem in honor of that Whataburger. Because I wrote this poem while craving Whataburger. But it was 2 in the morning, and I was not going to go outside at 2 in the morning or go anywhere. But I also had wanted to write, I love being on the road. I love driving. I love going places. And a few years ago, I got to drive around the Laredo and Carrizo Springs and Crystal City area, all of that. And so I had a few lines that were just living in my head for a couple of years. And I think I also wanted to write a poem about Cipacli. So for those of you who don't know Cipacli, again, going back to Nahuatl Aztec mythology imagery, was a crocodile-like figure who had mouths at every joint. And Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl trapped Cipacli, and against Cipacli's will, made Cipacli into the earth. And to try to appease Cipacli's rage, they created mountains and valleys and trees and rivers. They never asked permission, though. They just did this to Cipacli. So I wanted to write a poem about road tripping with Cipacli while craving Whataburger. Feed me wildflowers, feed me road, feed me sky, you say. Your crocodile mouth shaping each word strangely but ecstatically. Fill my eyes, my mouth, my hands, all of me, you say. Your crocodile hand with its webbed fingers trying to catch the wind. We drive over a bridge, the air changing slightly. You lean back in your seat, closing your eyes, taking in the sensation. We drive for miles and miles south and further south. No houses, no towns, only mesquites and nopales and more mesquites. You're always hungry. We stop for burgers in Carrizo Springs. We use the drive-thru. You eat yours all the way with bacon and cheese and jalapenos. We feed chicken tenders to all your other mouths. One of them has a sweet tooth and wants ice cream. We feed it an apple pie. I might be getting too comfortable with you in the car. I almost lose a finger. We don't stay there for long. Someone might have seen you. I keep checking the rearview mirror. No sign of Tezcatlipoca or Quetzalcoatl. Still, it doesn't hurt to be cautious. I decide it's time to go east, Highway 85. You don't say anything. You're too busy working my phone, trying to choose what music you want to listen to next. In Austin, you kept flipping back and forth between Willie Nelson and Ruben Ramos. In San Antonio, it was Classic Tejano with lots of Serena, La Mafia, and Maz, and Elsa Garcia, and some Ramirera. After Uvalde, it was all Chente, and was Alfredo, and Lucha, and Chavela. Finally, you put the phone down. There are so few cars on the road, I feel safe hitting 90 miles an hour. All of the huge bugs were killing, but the windshield are dying to the sounds of El General, Don Omar, and Ivy Queen. I love the road, you exclaim, your body shivering from top to bottom. I just grin, showing all my teeth. I know what you mean, I say, there's nothing like it. I don't know where we're going. I didn't ask questions when you showed up at my door and said, I've got to get out of town. I grabbed a change of clothes, some water, my bag, my keys. Everything else was already in the car. Serape, pillow, machete, the essentials. It was still dark when we left, in the still cool morning of spring. I feel a sudden longing for the beach. I turn to look at you, wondering if that's what you need, the Gulf. South Padre is too crowded, but we could head towards Port Isabel, then take that one road that goes and goes, trees and grass giving way to sand dunes and open sky. I could take you there. You look at me suddenly, your eyes intent, your words low and careful. I won't let them take me again. I'd rather die. I don't say anything, just nod. I don't call you corazón out loud, but you know it's what I always mean when I look at you. Not like I could talk around the knot in my throat anyway, but you understand. I won't leave you. Freedom or death. I'm going to try to hit some requests. All right, Robin requested this. I've only read this, I think, once before. If you are hungry, I will feed you. And actually, it's a quote from a movie called A Little Chaos. My pantries are full, bursting with preserves, dried herbs, salted meats, my gardens lush with salad greens, the bursting rounded bodies of tomatoes, zucchinis, eggplants. My orchard sighing with branches low and heavy, with fruit sweet and incandescent, all lying in wait. For so long, too long, eons, suns and moons, moons and moons, seasons, years and years. There is such hunger in you. It inspires an ache in me. Bite my hands when I bring golden fruit to your lips. Slip my hair into your mouth and sigh when you release it. All of this, my arms, my breasts, my belly, my thighs, my limbs, my skin, offered up to yours. Let there be nothing left unassuaged, unmet, unsaid, no appetite unsatisfied. I would see you slaked, sleek, soothed. Let me erase the gauntness of your cheeks, the bottomless longing in your eyes. When I was young, I tore out my heart, burned it, ashed it, so I could breathe. The second heart wore itself out, bittered and starved. It didn't even whimper, and I became accustomed to its absence. But this third one sprouted unlooked for, ate the rain and the sun and the breeze, flowered, fruited, and now red-fleshed. It has no bruise, no mark, no hurt, no scar. This one has no fear. It gives and gives, never depleting. If you are hungry, I will feed you. I think we have time for like 2 more. Let's go with some short ones. So this is the poem that told me that this book was going to happen. Because when you're writing a book, you never know what's actually going to happen until a certain poem comes around, and then, or a certain piece, a certain story, and then you're like, yep, this is coming together. So this one, I was waiting at a bus stop. And it was when, in Austin kind of has these interesting neighborhoods where like it's city on one side of the street, and then it's green, nothing on the other side of the street. And I was on one of those. It seems to me the stars are enduring. Here where I stand, the ancestors stood. The same wind, the same night sky, the same trees, the same sweet scent of grass. I touch my face, and the hand touching my face is 100 hands deep. We are like lost children who do not know our birth names, do not know our birth mothers, as if we had been taken, as if we had been abandoned, as if we had been raised in a world without mirrors. The world confuses history with truth, victims with survivors, lines on a map for reality. The headlines proclaim us foreign, dangerous, and dark-skinned hordes invading what has never existed. This is my earth, not theirs. It has always been my earth. Taste it and my blood, and your tongue will confuse the two, the one. This sky and my spirit, also one, the same ardent shade of blue. And this is my face as it has been for 1,000 years, all my mother's faces. I walk the same steps, listening to a half song, dreaming a half song. My voice fashions a half song. But my hands are not half hands. My heart is not a half heart. My blood is not half blood. My soul is not half soul. If I stand, they stand. If I live, they live. If I breathe, they breathe. If I speak, they speak through me. If I heal, they heal through me. I am never alone. I am never only one. I am the embodiment of 1,000 years' desire to survive, to live, to be free. Here where I stand, the ancestors stood. The same wind, the same night sky, the same trees, the same sweet scent of grass. I touch my face, and the hand touching my face is 100 hands deep. It seems to me the stars are enduring. I was going to read y'all a really long one, but I'm out of time. And I'm going to stop instead with this other poem. So again, speaking to road trips, I was on a road trip with my best friend and her husband. And you know how you get into these crazy conversations when you're in a car with people for hours? So we got into talking about first loves. And so I was talking about my first love at 17, and my best friend talked about her first love at 16, and then her husband is like, I was 5. When I was 5, I was so in love with her. I thought we would marry and get old, have dogs and kids and grandbabies and puppies and everything. And so we're laughing at him, and he's like, I'm serious. I was in love with her. That was going to be my life. She was going to be my life. And I was heartbroken when we ended the next year. And we're still laughing, and we're laughing. And we went to this event, we went to a reading, we went to dinner, and all of a sudden I was thinking about it. I'm like, I remember that. Actually, I was 6 the first time I had a heartbreak. And for some reason, you don't think these things are real, at that age. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, I told my friend Eric, I was like, you know what, I'm sorry I laughed at you. You're right. That was love. At 5 or 6 or whenever it was, that was really love. And so we drove back to Austin. I had some kind of deadline the next day. Instead of working on that deadline, which already I was ignoring by having gone on this day trip to this reading to dinner, instead of working on that deadline, I wrote this poem. And at 3 in the morning, I posted it or I sent it to them, and I was like, this is all y'all's fault. I was supposed to be working on this other thing. So this poem is What I Remembered Yesterday. At 6, I was the loner kid, the migrant kid following harvest seasons in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. We moved every few months, changing schools, changing homes. I was the poor kid, the dark brown kid, the only girl with short hair and pants. I was the quiet kid who stared at clouds and blades of grass, who walked the perimeter of the schoolyard as if plotting escape, a child in pain with no words for that pain. Ileana was one of the pretty girls, the girls who would grow up to become cheerleaders. Ileana with a pretty gold skin, only slightly lighter than her light brown hair. Ileana with eyes blacker than mine. I don't know what she did or said, but one day the cheerleaders-to-be sent her sprawling into the dirt and turned away. I don't remember if I helped her or if, finding herself alone, she sought me out. But from one moment to another, I went from alone to not alone. Impossible that we had ever been apart. Little soulmate, mirror reflection, inseparable. We had one shadow. We spent every second of her exile breathing the same air, staring at the same clouds, holding the same wildflowers. She held my hand. I loved her with all the passion of my 6-year-old heart. That should be funny, but it isn't. Because the passion of my 6-year-old heart was not the passion of my 17-year-old heart, or my 21-year-old heart, or my heart at any other point. At 6, a heart is infinite, devoid of want, devoid of selfishness, devoid of gains, devoid of possession, devoid of armor. At 6, a heart is infinite. I don't remember time. Was it weeks, months? I only remember I had no warning. One day to the next, her exile ended. The cheerleaders-to-be took her back. I waited for her, but she never returned to our meeting place. I watched to see if she'd turn and catch my eye and smile her quiet smile, but she never did. Almost 40 years later, I wonder, did it begin then? This lifelong love of heartbreak songs, betrayal songs, abandonment songs, unrequited songs. My 6-year-old voice didn't know the songs I would learn later. Maybe I was 15 or 16 or 17 when that song found me. The song I didn't know would follow me always. The song I know no matter how many years pass without singing it. The song I've known late, early, tired, drunk, sober, heart silent, and heart peeling. Probablemente ya de mí te has olvidado, y mientras tanto yo te seguiré esperando. Yesterday, I remembered the 6-year-old me and my 6-year-old heart, and I remembered what I'd forgotten. The 6-year-old lives in me still, the 6-year-old in me that waits and waits and is still waiting.
We have time for questions if y'all would like to ask any. And if not, there are books out there. You can go buy books, come get them signed by the author.
Questions, even random questions.
How did you come up with the order to put your poems in?
That is the most difficult thing ever. That never makes any sense. So at different times, my favorite thing is to throw everything on the floor or the wall. Just tape everything up. I even do that with stories, like the different parts of them. I tape them up on the wall or I throw them on the floor. This last book I cheated. So the brother who lives with me, he's also an artist and a writer and a poet. And I wrote all the poems in the order that I wrote them in, and I gave it to him, and I said, you put it in order. And he did, and that's the order they're in the book. I think maybe I moved 2 poems. But other than that, it's up to him. But it's one of the weird things with poems that, you know, poems you write individually, they're separate things. But whenever you're doing a book of them, people always tell you to like make a story out of it, to have a narrative arc, which makes no sense. So yeah, good luck with that one. You kind of have to find your way, you know, as you go. Every now and then you'll get a little feeling like, oh, this one should be at the end, and that should kind of be at the beginning. But no, that's always never gonna be smooth. Anyway, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, I know some like most of the forms of English. I was wondering if you were bringing up requirements for science or any other type of literature.
So what's funny in this book is that there was a poem that I tried to write as a sestina, and there was a ghazal that I tried to write, and there was something else that I also tried to write. I couldn't finish the poems. So they're titled things like a ghazal in pieces and an interrupted sestina, because it worked to get me to a certain point. Like I really loved the way that like a ghazal is shaped. It has certain words that have to rhyme in a certain scheme. So I love the words that it brought out, but then I couldn't use the form, and so I had to blow it up. But that's just me, because I am very bad at following like all rules at all. Like even rules I give myself, I'm very, very bad at following. My favorite thing to hear in this world is you can do whatever you want. So that's my advice with writing. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Figure out if it's good or not later. But at the beginning, do whatever you want. Or figure out how to make what you want to do look good, so you can keep on doing whatever you want.
So, do you usually write pen and paper or whatever you find, or do you have an idea and then you like, oh, let me get my laptop, or like, do you still have like a special, maybe like notebook or something that you keep with you?
So multiple answer.
Yeah.
One is that, and this is a fancy one, I don't usually carry things like this around.
Right.
I
you
like
a tattered
I
one
like
that you
composition,
just
yeah, I
kinda
carry composition notebooks. I carry those around. So those tend to be like journaling, ideas, little things I need to sketch down. I like to keep schedules in them, all my little sticky notes, because I don't trust my phone to keep this stuff. So like, this is how I stay organized, and it's just like writing, to make sure I have something to catch things. But usually, like I said, it's a composition notebook, so they're much lighter than that. But I can't read my own handwriting, so I ended up going to a laptop almost all the time. I'm trying to figure out how to make it so that when I'm in bed, I can put my laptop on the wall and it will stay there. Because sometimes like that's like the urge I get. I'm like, but if I sit down at my desk and I make everything, I'm gonna stay awake and like I need to go to sleep, but I want to write something. So I need to find a way to like just kind of, I don't know, I'm thinking like a vinyl, something thick, that like a sleeve to put the laptop in. Because I was trying to type in bed, and you know how it hurts when you like, you have your cell phone and it's bedtime and you're supposed to be going to bed, but you're still checking something, and then you fall asleep and you slap yourself in the face. It hurts a lot more with a laptop. It hurts a lot more. So I'm trying to not do those things. But it's also, I don't want to say it's, I'm going to call it efficiency. It's also laziness, but but I like when I am able to write or I'm revising something or shaping something, I want to be able to do it right now. I don't want to have to go and get my notes and type them in and then be able to, like, I need them available now. So that's the other reason that I tend to rely on the laptop a lot. Although one thing though, to say with people who save things to the computer who don't write on paper, a friend of mine brought this up and I thought it was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. She told me that she saves every draft of everything she ever wrote. And I'm like, how the hell do you organize that? Like, do you name things and have like letters and numbers and there's like 1A and 1B and 1C? And I was like, I could never do that. Like, that's crazy. Seriously, I was just like, so the only thing I would say to that, if you're one of those people and it works for you, cool. If it doesn't work for you, the advice I gave her was, you need to trust yourself that some of the changes you make are needed, and trust that you knew what you were doing when you changed it. Maybe keep like one copy back, but everything else let it go, because other stuff comes in. So just let it go. Robin, I think, was there. I have this whole theory that I always tell people about you know how we always talk about receiving things and you pay things forward and stuff like that. I think we don't think enough about what that whole system looks like. And the thing is that sometimes it's not just that you give and you give and you give, but you also have to learn how to receive. So you have to learn how to receive and you have to learn how to give. And you have to not block that energy for anybody else. So there was somebody also talking about like how do you catch, like when you get little inspirations and you don't write them down and you forget them. And I was like, what you're doing right there is that the universe is sending you things, sending you all kinds of gifts and inspiration. And when you say, no, I'm not going to write that down, you tell the universe, no, leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And so eventually the universe, gets hurt like everybody would if you were trying to offer somebody something. And the universe will stop giving you things.
It does.
Yes. So you always say yes to the universe, especially when you ask it for something. You keep saying yes, and thank you, and give me some more, and yes. And then you pass on something else somewhere else. And it's often not the same people, but that's fine. But just don't block the energy. So if that means, going back to your original question, if that means, paper so that you catch it, or laptop so that you can work on it, or whatever else works for you, just receive it, give it, say thank you. There was another question over here.
Why do you prefer to write all
So there's several different reasons. The main reason is because I love the writer bell hooks, who just hugely, I think, influenced me and shaped my way of thinking. And for those of y'all who don't know her, she is a feminist African-American writer who has written a ton load of books about everything from history to feminism to sisterhood to love to community to she has an amazing book called Teaching to Transgress, which I recommend to everyone, because if I had read that when I was in college, I wouldn't have been rebelling so much, because I would have understood that I was rebelling. But she actually doesn't use her real name. Bell Hooks is actually her grandmother's name. And so part of what, as far as I remember now, because it's been a while since I read it, so part of what she did with her name was to honor her ancestors. Part of it was to separate her ego from the work that she does. And then part of it, of course, is, a statement against patriarchy and all this capital letter business and whatever else. So it's all of that. So I do that to remind myself how much I love Bell Hooks, how much she's been an influence on me, and to remind me of the reasons I write. That was over here.
Sorry, I had a question. So you tend to write about very personal things that have happened to you, but they're very impactful, obviously. But it can be difficult to get there, to get to a place where you can write about things that are personal to you in a way that is, meaningful to other people. So I'm just wondering if you have any tips or thoughts on that.
Well, the first thing is that just because you write something, that does not mean you have to share it with other people. It does not mean you have to publish it. It does not mean you have to make a book out of it. It doesn't mean you have to sell it. The first thing that writing is for, it's always for the writer first. So it's always for you first. So it's up to you to decide when it is ready to be shared with somebody else, or to be published, or to do whatever it wants to do. I have known some amazing poets who would never call themselves poets. Amazing poets who will never publish a book of poetry, whose work is just intense and amazing and wonderful. So that's the first thing, is that. The second thing is that whenever anybody asks me, like, what do you do with writing, or what's the most important thing, for me it's always telling the truth. And the thing is that we forget how to tell, not just to tell the truth to other people, because I would, I'll say, go ahead, lie to other people, but you have to tell yourself the truth. And that's really difficult, to tell yourself the truth over and over and over again, and then tell yourself the truth some more, and then tell yourself the truth more after that, and then for 5 years and for a decade and for multiple decades and for the rest of your life, to try to tell yourself the truth all the time. So that when you're on the page, at least you're not lying there to yourself. And I think everything in every personal piece, or even with the poetry, I tend to write about like my life and my experiences. With fiction, I tend to kind of like ideas and different, so fiction does something separate. But even with the fiction, I try to not lie to myself there either. So that I don't lie to myself, my characters don't lie to me, my characters don't lie to each other. And so that, we find that bit of truth that has to do with healing, or with transforming, or even with just like surviving, to find that. But I don't know how to find that if untruth is part of writing. So those two things.
Anybody else?
Over here and then over there.
Go to her.
Go over here first. Okay, go first. You're up.
What made you write those books?
So I started writing when I was like 8. And the reason that I started writing, and actually I started with short stories, I woke up one day, I was 8, I was taking a nap. My older sister was watching like Guiding Light or something, some soap opera. So she didn't want to be bugged, and my 2 little brothers were asleep. My parents were working, and I had this really bad nightmare. I had this dream that my family had died, they burned in a house, and that I was left an orphan, And then I went to like a foster home, and I finally, as the dream goes by, I got adopted, and I was in a home, and I was feeling kind of comfortable, and I was walking home from school, my first day at school, and then some aliens abducted me. And so then at the end of the dream, I'm in this alien spaceship being taken away from this new family, and I'm being told that I'm going to be like, this alien slave, and that I'm gonna have to like fight my way through like this whatever, gladiator arena to like see if I can earn my freedom back. So at 8, this was my nightmare. And so I woke up just freaked out. But there wasn't anybody that I could go to that I could like cry on the shoulder or get any comfort from. There was nobody to tell. So what I did was, we didn't even have paper in the house because both my parents only made it to first, second grade elementary school here in Texas. So both of them were illiterate in both English and Spanish. So we didn't have any paper in the house. I found like 2 pens like by the phone. And I wrote my dream out on a brown paper bag from the grocery store. And when I wrote out the dream, I calmed down. And so I think in some way, like even up to now, writing is a consolation. It's like it's a place to go with all these things. And then over time, it's become other things. So the first book, Furia, I wrote after my mother died, about 19 years ago now. So it was kind of how to deal with all the grief and anger and family and all of that. This one, like I said, I started the short stories thinking about folklore and myths and the chusas, and there's a Llorona story and a Cucuy story. But also I wanted to write about like new myth and about like maps for survival. The Blood Sugar Canto was the fear and diabetes, and Cuicacali was just like this all these ideas that I've been meditating on since I was in college and learned about Texas history and indigenous history. And right now I'm working on 4 other books. So I have a novel that has to do with environmental justice and exploration of gender and sexuality. I have another short story collection that's dealing with the conquest, history, and the importance of creating art. And I think and then also I have another novel that I'm working on, where I'm writing my version of the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, but with like dragons and Mexicans and I don't know what else. So I'm excited about all that. But so I think, and I was telling somebody, like I thought after the first couple books, like you'd run out of the desire to write, like you wouldn't, but it's worse now. Like I hate going to work now. I can't stand like going to work. Because I'm just like, I want to write, and I want to write so bad now, and I want to write now more even than I wanted to, 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. Like it hurts how much I want to write now. So yeah, so I think each book, will teach me different things and show me different things, and I'm excited.
My question was sort of in this book, which is the one that I have in front of me. You really play with the layout a lot, and sort of the way that poems look on the page. I was just wondering when in the process you see that, does it sort of already appear to you that way when you're composing, or do you play around with it on the laptop?
Sometimes, and that's the other reason that I need the laptop too, because like you can't be retyping all this every single time, make me nuts. But usually I figure out the shape of the poem about halfway through. I actually can't finish a poem until I figured out what the shape of it is. And also sometimes, because the shape does interesting things. Like it gives you what the breath is, it gives you what the rhythm is, it gives you kind of the story flow of it, but then also it gives you the ending. And so there's so many times when I'll figure out halfway through what it should look like, and then I have to go back and cut or I have to fill in something because it's not the right shape anymore. But I'm always puzzled by the people who write poems that look the same every single time. Like I don't understand how that works, because when you think about it, when you have this poem, like it's this living thing, and each one has its sound and its rhythm, when you speak it. And so for me, it's necessary to also have what that looks like on the page. One of the poets that I love the way that he puts his poems down on the page, Willie Perdomo. And he's an amazing performer. But the thing is, you can see it on the page, so what it would look like, what the breath would be like, what the rhythms of it. Not his most recent book was called The Crazy Bunch, but the one before that was called think the essential hits of Shorty Bon Bon, which was inspired by his uncle who was, I don't remember now if he was a drummer or a trombone player or what, but he was in a salsa band. And so you see a lot of like the salsa rhythm, like the different music rhythms in the poems. But yeah, he's a great example of that.
I think we have time for one more.
Christina does it.
Anybody else?
Christina worked to get me here, so Christina gets to ask.
So I am interested in this idea of your writing, your work being what sounds like therapeutic for you, especially the range poem. That was really awesome. Has the doctor read this?
I have no idea.
Because
I
that
have
would
no
be,
idea.
I mean, like,
It's
just
like
to give him a copy.
I live in the same city,
Okay.
and so yeah, so I don't know if anyone's brought it to her attention yet.
Okay.
What's interesting also though is that I was invited to read at UT Austin in April to the medical students and the health research seminar people. So it'll be very interesting to find out if they know his doctor, who works in a hospital about 14 blocks away from them. So, I don't know.
Did the medical students like your organ poem? I did.
Well, this will be in April, so I'll see you then. But what's interesting to me is that I feel like a lot of medical staff that I meet, they end up liking the only medical friendly poem that is in the entire book, which is titled Grace, and it's about this whole thing of going to a doctor's office, and they always do, the foot review. And only one time ever, there was a physician's assistant who was so gentle, so very gentle, and so very careful with my feet. And in the poem, I talk about how it was like that act of grace of like having someone wash your feet with their hair. Like it was just so gentle, and it was just this one moment out of years and years of difficult experiences. Like one moment where I really felt like a person in a doctor's office. But they tend to like that one, of course. All right, so I think that is.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We have books outside if you want to go buy books and get a sign, if you want to chat with the author.
Do you want me to sign here, or do you want me to sign over there?
Wherever